First, an apology. I am going to talk in English, but my friend here, Maurizio, who you cannot see, is going to interpret for me. So please be patient with me. To make life a little easier for him, I'm going to try to stick to my script. But I may deviate here and there. Maria Sharapova, Katy Perry, LeBron James, George Clooney, David Beckham, Jay-Z. Today we tend to think of top athletes in the same way as we do singers, actors, and other popular entertainers. Certainly their earnings and their status are on par with show business celebrities. They're among the most visible people in the world. 40 years ago, it would have been an insult to call a boxer or a football player a celebrity. Athletes were not trying to entertain spectators, they were trying to win contests in competitive environments. What entertainment ensued was a byproduct in the sense that fans enjoyed watching it. But to compare athletes with singers or actors perished the thought. Supermodels was borderline defamatory. Anyone with a degree of visibility in or out of sports is sure to be offered the opportunity to lend their name and their image to a product or two or many more. What was once a supplementary stipend is now the main source of the highest earning athletes' income. Salaries, prize monies and match fees are bonus payments. Advertising brings in the serious money. The top 6 earners in the world of sport derive on average 80% of their money from advertising or related marketing activities, such as licensing their name. 9 out of every $10 Tiger Woods earned during his peak years came from advertising endorsements. Same with Phil Mickelson, the golfer. Roger Federer also has highly remunerative endorsement portfolios with 9 companies, including Nike, Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, and Credit Suisse, collectively paying him 22 million euros annually. Historically, athletes have been used sparingly. Babe Didrikson advertised chewing gum historically. Sam Snead, Jack Dempsey, Johnny Weissmuller in the early 20th century all had breakfast cereal contracts, as did Joe DiMaggio, the baseball player, of course. He became a celebrity by association when he married Marilyn Monroe in 1954. Timex watches discovered a market among sports fans, and the company ran advertising featuring, among others, the boxer Rocky Marciano and Mickey Mantle, the baseball player. In England, wristwatches have used the football player and cricket player Dennis Compton. He also fronted a campaign for Brylcreem hair product. And of course, in the 1990s, we had the arrival of David Beckham. While it sounds odd today, the golfer Ben Hogan was a pitchman for cigarettes, as well as golfing equipment. Incidentally, they were all white. But for advertisers, Hollywood stars were perfect. In addition to their conspicuousness, they had glamour. And this made models for aspirational consumers. One of the scholars in this area, named Nigel Thrift, says that the glamorous persona is often associated with high-end fashion, involves a combination of sex appeal, luxury, celebrity, and wealth. Athletes typically were not glamorous, though they were sometimes used to advertise practical commodities. And then something happened. sport replaced sex. At least according to one writer, Donald Katz, who reflects that in the early 1990s, and I quote, sports had arguably surpassed popular music as the captivating medium most essential to being perceived as young and sports-oriented. I presume what Katz meant was that the set of principles underlying and guiding sports began to inform advertising and marketing. Clean, wholesome, rule-governed competition. Healthy, young, like-minded individuals dedicated to the pursuit of excellence through hard work and honest endeavor and an insatiable desire for success. A lifestyle conducive to the promotion of good health and moral well-being. Sports appeared a positive force. About that, everyone was agreed. So why not use this consensus to sell stuff, products? The products did not need to have any genuine connection with sports. That's where the creativity of advertising entered, linking products as diverse as deodorants, alcoholic beverages, and cars with athletic activities. Advertisers can forge these kind of links in their sleep. Remind yourself, when you next notice a sports figure advertising a product, ask yourself, what has this product got to do with sports? Andrea Pirlo advertises Jeeps. Gianluigi Buffon or Mario Balotelli, they advertise Coca-Cola. Nothing to do with sports. In fact, unhealthy products. At the start of the 20th century, entertainers were largely insignificant. Fame was earned through political position, great military achievements, accomplishments in industry or science, or in the case of great religious leaders, through their moral authority. But from the 1930s, Hollywood entertainers grew to prominence, and advertisers realized they could sell practically anything. Robert Mitchum, the Hollywood actor's minor scrape with the law, was hushed up in 1948, for example. And in the late 1950s and early 1960s, Elizabeth Taylor leapt from one scandal to the next. Although in several senses, Elizabeth Taylor was exceptional and a precursor to what we now call celebrity. I'm going off script now, so Maurizio will have to follow me. Elizabeth Taylor. When she was filming Cleopatra in Ischia, just outside Rome, she and Richard Burton were playing Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Most of the filming took place in Cinecittà in Rome, but they moved to Ischia. They were followed by a new breed of photojournalists, which of course Italians called paparazzi. What they didn't realize is that Italian paparazzi were different from journalists in the United States or in England. And one photojournalist, named Gepetti, pursued them to Ischia and took one shot of Taylor and Burton in flagrante. That one single shot, that image, started celebrity culture. Because of Elizabeth Taylor, in the 1960s, the otherworldly, godlike character, the most unapproachable but most famous woman in the world, if she could not have a private life, nobody could. And so we started the process which led us to today's celebrity culture. Sports figures were not perfectly trustworthy characters. In 1988, Ben Johnson, the sprinter, was sent home from the Seoul Olympics after winning the 100 meters in record time, but failed a dope test. It was at that time the greatest scandal sport had ever known. And it cast a shadow not only over track and field, but across the whole landscape of sport. 6 years later, the figure skater, Nancy Kerrigan, was physically attacked by the ex-husband and bodyguard of one of her Olympic rivals, Tonya Harding. Between the two cases, there was the Mike Tyson rape trial in 1992. Tyson embodied everything iniquitous, depraved, and degenerate in sport. Who was the model of everything that was admirable and trustworthy, virtuous, excellent? In 1985, after 8 years of steady growth and increasing profit, Nike reported 2 consecutive losing quarters. So when it signed Michael Jordan, there was a risk. He was, like the majority of other National Basketball Association players, black, African American, and at that stage unproven in the professional ranks. The National Basketball Association already had an image problem. As one writer of the Los Angeles Times put it, it was a drug-infested, too black league. The National Basketball Association in the 1990s became a one-man show that all the other players were allowed to crash. Michael Jordan was like air, or air with a capital A. He was everywhere, all the time. There was no escaping the Jordan image. Whether it was on TV or movies, cereal boxes, posters, everywhere. It was as if he was a palatable presence in everyone's life. Yet there was a sense in which people not only liked him, but they felt they knew this crisply wholesome, clean living, dark-skinned, but not dark man. Nowadays, companies seem to be able to create saleable celebrities by pushing buttons. But in the late 1980s, there was no surefire way, and given the historical suspicions about black people and black sportsmen in general, the National Basketball Association wondered whether Nike's investment was an investment or a gamble. But it was a gamble, and one that paid off. Naomi Klein, the writer, suspects there had been other gifted athletes before Jordan, but none reached what Klein calls an otherworldly level of fame, otherworldly. Klein is not questioning Jordan's basketball prowess, but before Jordan, sports stars, no matter how great or good or brilliant, were athletes who happened to do advertising. They weren't synonymous with a brand as Jordan was. Nike changed all that. It was the company who embarked on what Klein calls myth-making, making myths, creating an aura around Jordan. Who said man wasn't meant to fly? Asked one of the early ads, showing an apparently gravity-defying Jordan. So while other figures, such as Jesus and Che Guevara, Marilyn Monroe, Muhammad Ali, were all icons, none was manufactured as such. Jordan was manufactured. His iconic status was designed to sell Nike goods. And somewhere in the manufacturing process, Jordan came to symbolize a new version of blackness. What the writer Ilan Page calls embraceable blackness, something with which white people could feel safe. When we view black men in our media, their representations generally fall into two disparate categories. On the one hand, we're treated to the grand celebrity spectacle of black male athletes, movie stars, and pop entertainers, conspicuously enjoying wealth and privilege that fuel ordinary citizens' fantasies. On the other hand, we're subject to the real-time devastation, slaughter, and body count of a steady stream of faceless black males on the 6 to 11 o'clock news. Guerrero named Jordan, along with Michael Jackson and Bill Cosby, as personifications of the former category. Jackson had, in 1993, been accused of making sexual offensive contacts with a 13-year-old boy. Cosby was 58 when Guerrero wrote his article. Jordan, at 32, was a more apposite or appropriate reflection of the grand celebrity spectacle. When Thomas Oates and Judy Pollenbaum, two American writers, conclude, and I quote, Jordan was able to escape both the patronizing and the demonizing extremes often associated with black athletes, they missed the point. He didn't escape them. He rendered them irrelevant. Here was a black man with none of the usual faults associated with black men. In fact, he had no faults at all. He didn't talk politics, and his comments about the condition of black people were anodyne. Rashid Barth, another American writer, condensed Jordan's philosophy. Get the money. Don't say anything substantial. And for heaven's sake, do not offend white people. Nike didn't want Jordan to upset anybody. That was the whole point. His embraceable quality. It was intended to be good for all groups, young, old, black, white, male, female, everybody. For Dylan A.T. Minor, another writer, Jordan, or rather the Jordan brand, represented the commodification of blackness to a globalizing marketplace. I apologize about the word commodification, but it is a word we use today. Black athletes were not typically inundated with endorsement offers. More usually, they were regarded with suspicion. Jordan was a different type of black athlete. No figure in history had moved so much merchandise from shelves as Jordan. While often described as an icon, it's worth remembering that icons are usually regarded as representative symbols of something. Manhood, for example, or freedom, or a new era, and so on. But what did Jordan symbolize? Jordan was a living human being, a flawed mortal who played basketball for Chicago Bulls. Jordan was also a fantasy. He lived in the minds, in the imaginations of countless acolytes or followers who believed they knew him. This was the Jordan of the imagination. It was the Jordan Nike made and sold just like a commodity. Jordan was not just the cynosure, the person at the center of 1990s sport, but he was the first truly modern sports celebrity. Meanwhile, in Manchester, England, David Beckham was ruffling the feathers, annoying the club manager, Alex Ferguson. Married in 1999 to Victoria Adams, then Posh Spice, Beckham combined his spectacularly successful sports career with an even more spectacular career in modeling, in advertising, and in many, many other activities, including attending premieres and accompanying his pop star wife to fashion shows where he consorted with his designer friends. Ferguson was an old school manager. He made it clear that he regarded Beckham's extracurricular activities as unnecessary distractions. These activities resulted from a bulging portfolio of contracts with global brands like Adidas, PepsiCo, Police, Eyewear. By the time Beckham met his future wife in 1997, the Spice Girls had already released 4 global hit singers and an album called Spice, which had then sold 10 million copies and eventually would sell 28 million copies. Yet the band had not even been on a concert tour. Victoria announced her career intentions. Right from the beginning, she said, I wanted to be as famous as Persil Automatic. Persil Automatic is Britain's best-selling detergent, soap powder. Some people, including this writer, suspect that Victoria was well-versed in the art of celebrity making, and she stealthily put Beckham together with her own manager, Simon Fuller, whose 19 agency was focused on show business rather than sports figures. He does handle Lewis Hamilton and Andy Murray, who later signed with 19, this agency. Acclaimed in Europe and Asia, Beckham was, in the year 2000, still relatively unknown in the United States. The movie, Bend It Like Beckham, in which he did not appear, but which it still had the effect of promulgating his name, was not released until 2002. When Beckham transferred from Manchester to Real Madrid in 2003, the name Beckham had global resonance. Whether drinking Pepsi or preening behind sunglasses, the seemingly self-replicating image was inescapable. It was around this time that brand Beckham was insinuated into our popular vocabulary. We talk all the time about brand Beckham nowadays. The object of brand Beckham was, and I say we can only presume because it was never publicly stated, but to create a multi-purpose word and an accompanying image capable of adding market value to any conceivable product that was available for purchase. And the market was very wide, right from felt tip markers that sell for a price of a copy of Vogue to clothes that would grace the front cover of the September issue of that magazine. Cologne, of course, underwear, motor engine oil, and a miscellany of other items were all marketed in the name of Beckham. In terms of calculation, ambition, and brazenness, brand Beckham was anything equal to anything dreamt up by Phil Knight, the creator of Nike, when he signed Jordan. The contrasts are revealing. Jordan was marketed as a sports genius, a freak, and I mean that as a very unusual figure, rather than someone with a striking abnormality. It was commonly considered that his inspiration arrived easily, and his perfect execution on the basketball court casually slipped into place. By contrast, Beckham was promoted as an uncommunicative, he didn't speak very much, pop artist. Before he moved to Madrid, he barely gave any interviews. He was never seen in public, apart from on game days, only at red carpet fashion events. His detractors, his critics, overlooked this attention to detail, but it helped create a quality, an aura. The air of secrecy surrounding Beckham wouldn't have been of any consequence if no one was interested, but millions were enticed by the inaccessible, unapproachable, yet dashing figure whose every move, it seemed, was carefully planned and monitored. The comparisons between Beckham and Jordan were underlined by Beckham himself when he insisted on the number 23 shirt that he wore at the Chicago Bulls and later at the Los Angeles Galaxy. But Jordan was undeniably the best basketball player of his time, and from that matter, any other generation. No one ever rated even the peak form Beckham in the world's top 20, maybe not even the top 50 players. The transfer fee Real Madrid paid for his services, 35 million euros, reflected his brand value, not his athletic proficiency. I quote, Real Madrid's commercial revenue from club merchandise sales, such as replica shirts, increased 67% in Beckham's first season alone. That's from John Vincent, the writer. He goes on, the acquisition of Beckham also helped open up new markets in Asia and the United States and helped propel Real Madrid past Beckham's former club, Manchester United, as the richest club in the year 2004. No one could accuse brand Beckham of selling itself cheaply. In 2004, Gillette, the razor company, offered Beckham an estimated 50 million euros to front a worldwide advertising campaign for a new razor. There was a backstory to the deal. Shortly before, the clean-living family man who radiated health and well-being was reported to be having an affair with Rebecca Luce, who worked for his former agency. Beckham himself said nothing, though Luce was very generous in confessing the whole story to the media, for money, of course. For a while, she became a celebrity in her own right, as befits a woman who claims to have had sex with the world's most lusted after man. Doomsayers predicted the end of Beckham, or the end of brand Beckham. But they misunderstood the chemistry of celebrity culture. Far from ruining the brand, the scandal heightened interest in it. No longer was Beckham the too good to be true model of piety. David Beckham was just another guy, like everybody else. He too could succumb to temptation just like any other man. The hitherto angelic Beckham now had a touch of devilry. And as we know, consumers like celebrities to be less godlike and more human. Sales of the MP3 Power Razor that Beckham endorsed spiked by 13% in the year following the start of his contract. Further deals with global brands like Armani and Vodafone followed, leading even skeptics to assume that Beckham could sell anything. And that included association football, calcio, a game played all over the world, including the United States, where it is a very poor relation to baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. Presumably, this was Philipp Anschutz's reasoning when he offered Beckham what seemed a catastrophic amount of money to move from Madrid to Los Angeles to play for the Galaxy, a club that is owned by Anschutz's company, AEG. Anschutz was a founding investor of America's Major League Soccer, the league in which the Galaxy competed. AEG also owns the Houston Dynamo Club, and at various times during the history of Major League Soccer has held ownerships in the Chicago Fire, the San Jose Earthquakes, the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars, and DC United. Hence, Anschutz had a heavy investment in promoting soccer in America. Beckham's 5-year deal, starting in 2007, was thought to be worth about $228 million US dollars, then about 168 million euros. Staggering. By the end of his first contract with the Galaxy, Major League Soccer was feeling the effects of brand Beckham. The league, which once had to pay broadcasters to air its games, had signed a $30 million 3-year deal with NBC, the American television broadcaster, supplementing agreements that it already had with ESPN, Fox Univision, and the Galaxy agreed to another deal with Time Warner Cable, worth $55 million over 10 years. Attendances grew year on year. Even so, the outlay on Beckham and other marquee players from outside the US made it impossible for Major League Soccer to turn a profit, and in 2012, Beckham left the league only marginally better off. The cases of Jordan and Beckham should prod us into wondering, are athletes different to popular entertainers, including reality TV stars, who most of us assume are reacting spontaneously to forces all around them and cashing in on their ability to monitor their times. Athletes are not new arrivals. They have been doing the same purposeless things for decades, kicking or throwing balls, hitting each other, running around tracks, and so on. But we can't help but imagine today's celebrity athletes closely resemble yesterday's sports stars. In fact, we don't have to imagine it, we can see it from archival footage on television. Where there was once colourful characters or superstars, there are now celebrity athletes or icons, images created by corporate interests for the purposes of selling in a market that respects no national boundaries today. They are capable of being monetized, that is, converted into a form of currency. And in this vital respect, they're closer to show business entertainers than athletes. Corporations like Adidas and Armani waste no time in co-opting young men and women into their global projects, determining their value separately from their competitive accomplishments. Celebrity athletes are given the same kind of treatment as any other kind of celebrity. They're turned into commodities and made to function as marketing vehicles. They rarely, if ever, resist. Is it so demeaning to display your D-Star automatic chronograph if Redo are paying you a 7-figure sum to be its brand ambassador, to use the term that corporations prefer today? Nicole Kidman's dignity didn't suffer if she wore an Omega, nor did Daniel Craig's. Athletes have been absorbed into celebrity culture, just like entertainers. Or have they? Some writers, for example Barry Smart, who's a sociologist in Australia, thinks not. He says that it is impossible, and I quote, to subordinate the ethos of sport to values of entertainment and commerce. And by ethos, I think Smart means the characteristic spirit of sports as manifested in its principles and aspirations or ambitions of its competitors. Athletes are not just performers who work to amuse audiences. Unlike other celebrities, especially those whose transitory fame comes via reality TV, sports stars have authenticity. This is a term that Smart uses to stake out the difference between athletes and all other celebrities. He means that in order to become known, they must first demonstrate competence, if not excellence, in sport. They are occasionally, lamentably, inept athletes at major tournaments who are widely publicized for their gameness. But their time in the sun is usually quite short. And for the most part, athletes who rise to global fame confirm the authenticity of their exceptional status and significant difference, if not their uniqueness, argues Smart, not me. He isn't so dazzled by this that he does not recognize that, and I quote him again, since the 1960s, a series of economic and cultural processes have transformed the world of sport, end quote. The threat posed to authenticity, a vulnerable quality, he calls it, by commercial interests, is apparent everywhere. And yet, he writes, the authenticity of sporting figures like Michael Jordan, who I've mentioned, Tiger Woods, and of course David Beckham, ultimately derives from the quality of their playing performance, from their records of success in competition. That is Smart's argument, not mine. Authenticity is one of those words that creates an illusion. It looks like a simile for genuineness or legitimacy, whereas it hides a method, a way in which areas of the culture industry work to turn playing skills into pure artistry, natural talent, or genius. These are terms that sports fans have become accustomed to. Undeniably, there are athletes who have convinced all of us that they possess genius, talent. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Schumacher, Cristiano Ronaldo. These are among an elite of sportsmen who had dominated their particular sports for unfeasibly long periods of time. Their achievements are a matter of record, and they defy contrary arguments. Unlike practically anything else, their genius can be monetized. Ronaldo earns 80 million euros a year, as opposed to Lionel Messi, who struggles on a mere 68 million euros, depending on your source. Every branch of entertainment boasts incomparable athletes with incomparable talent. It forces us to confront a question we have raised before. Is talent inherent or is it ascribed? Let me explain. The conventional view is that talent is a natural aptitude or a skill, something that some people are gifted with at birth. I suggest a more elliptical conception, an understanding talent from contextual clues. Talent is whatever we decide to call talent. It's a matter of convention, in other words. We agree that the capacity to hit tennis balls with a racket at great force and with great accuracy constitutes a talent. Or an adeptness at playing a scripted role with a persuasive conviction, or a skill in playing musical instruments or singing in a way that other people enjoy. Time changes context, of course. We do not find many talented lute players nowadays. Talent, from this perspective, is something that audiences, all of us, credit. It is an acknowledgement of an uncommon ability rather than the ability itself. Athletes are not so different from other entertainers. What they do or how they perform is of only superficial importance. More significant is how consumers respond to them. I'm going to go off script again, Maurizio, so follow me, please, I will be slow. I often wonder to myself if I could go back to 1787, to Prague, Teatro di Praga, to the premiere of Don Giovanni. How did audiences respond when they left the theatre, having witnessed the performance for the first time ever? Did they say, "We have just witnessed and heard the most heart-stoppingly beautiful music ever created"? and we have heard the sounds of a composer who is truly gifted by God? Or did they just say, that was pretty good, wasn't it? I enjoyed that. I don't have an answer. I think the latter. Or 1941, when the press went to the first screening of Citizen Kane. Some thought it was quite good. Some others thought it was useless. It is, of course, acknowledged as arguably the greatest movie of all time. But we acknowledge the genius of Orson Welles in retrospect. We credit Welles with the genius for making a film that created history. I'm back to script, Maurizio. Steffi Graf once said of Maria Sharapova, she is so talented. There was always a chance that she would come back to this level. Graf's opinion was widely shared. Sharapova had talent and used it to stage a comeback when her career seemed doomed. In 2009, Sharapova was then 22, going on 23, and she had slumped to the position of 126 in the world's women tennis rankings. It was her all-time low position. She hadn't won a major tournament for over a year and had struggled with an incessant shoulder injury. After a promising start to her tennis career, the Russian-born, American-based player faded and was hardly a factor in Grand Slam events. And then, in the year 2012, she bounced back to peak form and won the French Open. Her desultory tennis form had, up to this point, had no effect on her celebrity status. Sharapova had still been the most conspicuous and highest earning female athlete in the world, ever. And she had remained that way ever since, up to the present day. Even when she hit rock bottom, she was earning $25 million per year, twice as much as any other female athlete in sport. Even when the prize money dried up, she prospered from an endorsement folio that included Nike, Head tennis rackets, Evian, Clear shampoo, Sony Ericsson, Tiffany, Tag Heuer, Parlux, which made Sharapova for women, cologne, of course. All celebrities have their own cologne. And even when she suffered on court, Sharapova extended her Nike agreement for 8 years from 2010 to a deal worth potentially $70 million. And remember, this is while she was playing terribly. Sales of her Nike line of tennis apparel shot up 26% in the year 2010, and her ballet flat shoe was the top-selling shoe by Cole Haan. By the time she had recovered her early career touch, her earnings were up to 20 million euros. Over 10 million more than Serena Williams, who is often acknowledged, as we know, as the best female tennis player of all time. Sharapova's earnings were only half of Rihanna's and Lady Gaga's, and about 7 million less than Kristen Stewart, but more than Sofia Vergara, the American television star. Sharapova has 8 million Facebook friends. Even if we accept Steffi Graf's point about Sharapova having talent, her prodigiousness in securing the lucrative endorsement deals and maintaining that high level of visibility disproportionate to what Smart would regard as her authentic achievements on court. They are disproportionate. Sharapova may not have single-handedly, and I use Smart's word, subordinated the ethos of sport to entertainment and commerce, but she showed how perfectly one complemented the other. She was consistently the best known, most frequently Googled, and most avidly followed female athlete in the world during the 21st century. Serena and the other Grand Slam winning contemporaries such as Sam Stosur, Victoria Azarenka could beat her on the court, but nowhere else. Historically, there are many other athletes whose dominance in their respective sports would seem to justify crediting them with talent, yet who register little recognition beyond sports. In the 1970s and 1980s, David Bryant was supreme in lawn bowls, Geet Sethi in billiards, Phil Taylor in darts, netball, Vicky Wilson, squash, Heather Mackay. These were leaders in their respective sports. But much garlanded as these players were, they were never offered the big endorsement contracts, nor were they given the celebrity status that are enjoyed by the athletes I mentioned earlier. Being in the right sport, the one that receives the media attention, matters more. But there are other factors. Sharapova was white. She was over 6 foot tall and had the kind of looks that we associate with supermodels. Beckham also had good looks. Woods didn't. Jordan was decent looking, but not drop dead. And of course, he was an African American. There are no rules, no formula. Context is vital to our understanding why some athletes have been and still are acknowledged as authentically great and others remain unknown. Circumstances, not looks, ethnicity, or playing prowess influence who becomes a celebrity. We do not have to deny Smart's claim that some athletes are better than others. We simply have to point out that this may, in some contexts, have a bearing on their status, but in other contexts, it may not. In answering the question, why has sports moved from the periphery to the centre of popular culture, the British writer John Horn says, I quote, "The media, sponsors and marketing agencies are merely exploiting a growing interest in sport which has been created by increasing media coverage of sport. Yet surely they aren't merely exploiting. They are actively propelling sport to its central position. Advertisers made athletes featured in campaigns more visible, recognizable, and in a self-fulfilling way more attractive to customers and other advertisers. Horn believes that there were other factors at work, the interest in health, fitness, and the overall well-being of the human body being another. True. In the 1970s, consumers nourished an awareness of the body. Sport provided an arena in which hale and hearty bodies were displayed on the screen. A more decisive change was the proliferation, the growth of television channels and their obvious requirements, content. They needed something to fill television channels. Sport provided a relatively cheap content. Production costs were low compared to drama. And for commercial television companies, the advertising income more than offset them. ESPN's venture in 1980 was every bit as audacious as MTV, which was launched in 1981, while the latter filled its airtime with music. ESPN showed nothing but sports. But by 1998, the channel was received by 70% of all American households and broadcast 23% of all televised sports. The network's reach today has extended to 160 different companies and is provided in 19 languages. Surely you can have too much of a good thing. Not when it comes to sport, it seems. Between 1991, when the National Basketball Association clinched a $600 million four-year deal with NBC television, to the year 2011, when the National Football League signed deals worth $27 billion over 9 years, sports underwent an astonishing transformation, not just in the United States, but everywhere in the world. England's Premier League soccer TV deal rose from 304 million over 5 years to £3 billion sterling over the next 3 years. And this reflects the value the product sport delivers. But it also reflects the status of the competitors, who not only earn as much, and as in many cases much more than popular entertainers, but who have comparable status in our eyes. Where once television viewers watch competition, now they consume spectacle. There is a difference. Sport is presented in much the same way as other entertainment, whether music or drama or news. And it is also consumed in the same way. So why should we not call sport entertainment? This may not sound such a defamatory question today, but it would have been a slight, an insult to competitors who regarded themselves as heroes separated from other mortals. At the same time, there are rogue elements in sport, and these too have been domesticated. Once there were no place for rebels or political protesters in sport. But resistance has been turned into style, making people like Andre Agassi, Eric Cantona, Dennis Rodman, and of course Maria Balotelli seem like insurgent forces instead of house-trained pursuers that they really are. Nike, more than any other advertiser, expertly honed their images to youthful insolence. More likely, they were agents of containment, working on behalf of an organization that positioned itself as rebellious, maverick, and anti-authoritarian, as Jim McKay once described Nike. One wonders how Nike might have managed Muhammad Ali, who spoke out in favor of the separation of blacks and whites and opposed the social integration that was championed by people in the 1960s and is still championed in the present day, of course. Or Diego Maradona, an admirer of the Cuban leader Fidel Castro, and whose hand he kissed in deference. Or Tommy Smith or John Carlos, who were expelled in shame after their Black Power salute at the 1966 Olympic Games and never allowed to compete in sport again. Even Billie Jean King, whose sexuality became the source of scandal in 1981 when her secretary took legal action against her and outed her as a lesbian. In their own ways, these and many other athletes have resisted conformity, whether protesting against war or consorting with communist leaders or transgressing sexual norms. As such, they were internationally known, admired by some, but abhorred by others. But they were not celebrities. Their private lives were not pored over. They were not hunted by paparazzi. Their reputations were built from athletic accomplishment, not advertisements. And none of these had their signature cologne. Deeds that were once regarded as violations cost all of the figures that I've just mentioned dearly. Today they would be the equivalent of rhodium, the valuable metal. Though, of course, in Billie Jean King's case, the disclosure of sexual preferences after an outing is not especially inflammatory material, especially when it comes to tennis players. Stigmatized, or in the case of Smith and Carlos, ostracized in their day, they would be notorious nowadays. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing for a celebrity. As sport has morphed into entertainment, its main characters were subject to the same treatment as all other celebrities, and their rewards are great. 60 million euros per year is no longer an extraordinary yearly income for many elite performers. For such earnings, the surrender of a residual private life, a promise not to misbehave, and an outward commitment to the values of sport must seem a fair exchange. That's all.